Get unemployment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Apparently, we're live now.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. You need me to read this again? Rezoning application of ours.
Please, if you don't mind.
This is a rezoning application for RZ 1202-1045-3232 La Paloma Avenue, Westminster by the Sea Presbyterian Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. So again, for the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, City Planner with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. The subject application that you just mentioned, Madam Chair, is the subject property is 3232 La Paloma Avenue, and the property owner applicant is Westminster by the Sea Presbyterian Church Incorporated. The subject property is about a 15th of an acre, and there is an existing structure in the property that contains about 725 square feet. The current zoning for the property is RSF-2, which is our urban single-family residential detached district, and the proposed application is for the P district, which is our public quasi-public district. There is an existing use in the property, which is a counseling services office. So the reason why we're here today, board members, is because there is a zoning issue that transpired over the course of time. And I'll just go back real quickly with regards to the history of this property. So in 1997, April 23rd, the property was annexed into the city limits. It was in unincorporated Volusia County, and the property owner at the time, a single family property owner, wanted to get into the city, and so they made that application. Shortly thereafter, a few months after, the property was rezoned to the current zoning, which is RSF-2 district. But there is something to note, Madam Chair and board members, is that in 2003, the city was moving from paper copied mapping, zoning maps technology, if you want to call it that, to digital GIS, Geographic Information System map technology. The city did not have the capacity within the city to actually, the organization to actually make that change, so we hired a third-party consultant. The third-party mapping contractor inadvertently assigned the wrong color to the subject property and the adjacent property to the south, unfortunately as well. The city did not notice this change until sometime recently. So the color that was assigned to incorrectly assigned to this property and the property to the south was a green color, and that green color on the map represents the P district, which is a public quasi-public district. Although there was this mapping color error on the map itself, it didn't really change the zoning. It didn't actually change the zoning designation of the property. What actually changes the zoning designation of a property is obviously an ordinance. And there was no ordinance change with regards to those subject properties. So in 2007, the property ownership was transferred to the current owner, which is a church. And then after having a request by the Presbyterian Westminster Church this earlier in 2021, the city adopted Ordinance 2021-07, and that particular ordinance essentially allowed, as an accessory use to church services in the P District, counseling services. So on August 31st, 2021, after the property owner made an application to the city to open a counseling center or office at the property, the city approved such operation at the subject address. So a couple months after the business opened, we received several inquiries from the adjacent neighbor to the south. And in having that conversation and doing some research to validate what we thought was the actual zoning of the property, staff discovered that there was a third-party mapping error by the contractor who was hired to do our maps in 2003. So city staff met with the property owner, and we essentially told them the only way to go around, or to basically deal with this issue is to actually submit a rezoning application to zone the property P. And that's the reason why we're here today, board members. So this is an aerial view of the property. You can access the property through Westminster Avenue via South Peninsula Drive, or from Esmeralda or any of the other local connecting streets from South Atlantic Avenue. This is a street view of the property. This is actually a 2014 Google Map street view. This is what the zoning map actually looks like today. And as you can see, it is that, I don't know, it's a yellow-greenish type thing. And you can see the green to the north of that. Let me see if I can get the mouse there. This is the church proper. and obviously this is La Paloma Avenue. If the rezoning application is approved by the city council later this month, next month, then this would be the color. Essentially, the color would change to match the subject church proper to the north and to the west. So the P District zoning classification, I just want to read off real quickly what the purpose and intent of the P District is, which is public quasi-public district. And it says, and this is from section 1421.6 of the Land Development Code, the purpose and intent of the public quasi-public district is to best satisfy the internal, recreational, and governmental service needs of the entire community. This district has been developed or implemented in the city's land use plan, but not necessarily limited to those areas shown for public quasi-public. So you can see under list of permitted principal uses, you can see churches, and under accessory uses, you can see counseling services. So staff did an impact analysis, and you'll see that in our planning report that's attached to the agenda today. And this is just a summary table of the analysis. And in staff's view, all the criteria are met. I'll just go over them real quickly. One of the first criterion is that there is no impact on the environment or natural resources, and obviously the property is already built out and it's not changing to an industrial use or even a commercial use. It's just going to be an office for counseling services. The second one is that impact on the economy, and again, it's not changing to commercial, it's not changing to multifamily residential or anything like that. So the staff believes there's not going to be any change. Impact on public facilities. I have another table where I'll show you that the impacts are actually reduced when it comes to public facilities such as water, sewer, etc. Impact on transportation facilities. The impact is de minimis in staff's view, and in the table that I'll show you next, you'll see that there's only a small increase in traffic as a result of this change of use, meaning from a single-family land use to an office use, to a public office use. In terms of housing accessibility, there's no change, even though it's the land use or the zoning is for single-family residential. In fact, this property has been off the market for housing, so it's a perceived subtraction from the housing stock, but that's not really the case because it's never really been on the market for the last 10 plus years. In terms of consistency with the site, with the comprehensive plan, you'll see an analysis in staff's report that it is indeed consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. And then the seventh criterion is that whether or not there were change in the conditions that require the zoning amendment, and there has been no change in the conditions of the environment or in the neighborhood that would require this change. And the eighth is whether or not there was a mistake in the zoning of the property, the original zoning of the property. There was no mistake in the original zoning of the property. The property ownership transferred in 2007 to the church, and it was always believed that the property was indeed zoned for P, when we obviously realized recently that there was an error and in fact it wasn't zoned P. So in terms of a physical benefit to the neighborhood, staff believes the impact will be neutral. And the reason for that is because it's an office use, it's not a commercial use or a high density use. We believe that by changing the zoning district classification from single family to P public for the purposes of having a counseling office there, that would be an accessory to the primary church that is to the west and to the north of the property, that it would indeed create a stabilizing effect on the surrounding areas. And we do not believe that it would create spot zoning. Spot zoning is generally when something that's totally inconsistent with the neighborhood, I'm summarizing obviously, is being assigned in a particular neighborhood that would impact the character of that neighborhood. And so the other three or four criteria essentially tie into spot zoning, so I'll not go over those. The final one is whether or not the zone change would materially diminish the value of the surrounding properties. I did attach in your staff report. Staff did a quick analysis through Zillow.com to determine what the values have been for selected properties, including the adjacent property to the south and the subject property, to see whether or not the values have diminished over time as a result of this change in land use, meaning changing from a single family to an office use, and we have not seen any change, at least according to Zillow.com. Negative change, I should say. In fact, the values actually have increased. So this is the impact summary analysis of public facilities that I mentioned earlier, and it's also in your staff report and available for public perusal as well. And as you'll see, Essentially, all the impacts in the yellow column here, for the most part, is actually a reduction in impact. And these are usually standards that are in the City of Daytona Beach Shore's Comprehensive Plan, Land Development Code, and also the City of Port Orange's Land Development Code for standards that we don't cover in our own Land Development Code. There is one increase, and as I mentioned earlier, it is a de minimis increase based on staff's analysis with regards to traffic. And you'll see it's basically 2 extra vehicles per peak hour travel time. So with that said, staff is recommending approval of the proposed rezoning application. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. I believe there might be a party from the church here. Oh, I'm sorry, they're right here. So they can also field any questions, and I believe there are some citizens as well who would like to voice their concerns.
Do you have any questions for Stuart yet?
Thank you.
The only one question I have is, so we're really trying to right a wrong that was done years ago. It's just a formality, basically, to give them what we thought they had years ago.
That is staff's view based on our analysis
you.
and based on the situation that transpired over time.
Thank you. Is the applicant here? Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you for hearing this, board members. I'm Jeffrey Sumner, Jeffrey Sumner. I've been pastor of this congregation since September of 1985.
Can we go ahead and swear in anybody that's going to speak on this matter?
Sure. I do have.
And is there anybody else, members of the public? Can we just do a mass swearing in of anybody who's going to testify on this matter?
Yes, we have.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since 1985, we've been a congregation of children, youth, and adults. Sometimes people come to me and ask for counseling, and as a pastor of a busy congregation, I can't always do all of that counseling. So in 1986, I joined with other people who started the Presbyterian Counseling Center, one location in Daytona Beach, to try to help assist in the counseling of families. Now, from that one time, we've grown to 7 satellite offices on church campuses and 18 therapists. We are making a difference in the area. The idea up here was we bought the house in 2007 from our clerk, the clerk of session, which is like the clerk of the board who passed away. It became our associate pastor's house from 2008 until the time when it was vacant. And I thought a vacant house is not a good use of land. It could be vagrancy. And so we had a man who said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have counseling in Daytona Beach Shores, because all the other vicinities in Volusia County have one of the facilities. And so creating the idea that the house was a perfect setting for family counseling. And it's very small, so they're just 2 counselors that specialize in family counseling, plus how many can be there? 2 for one or 2 per people with each counselor in 2 rooms. It's a very small impact, and we have a parking lot next door. So we thought this would be a great addition to the Shores and a wonderful help to some of our people who were looking for the guidance that they needed for their families. I'm joined by our clinical director and administrative director and board members who would be willing to share with you that that is the intention of this location. It is to, they're not even licensed for anything beyond the family therapy. And that's what we are trying to do with very low impact to the community, other than helping the community. I do have neighbors that would be willing to speak, and there are some papers here that are signatures. But you tell me what you would like next. I would like just for you to hear from the clinical director, if you don't mind. Clinical Director Lisa Benitez.
Good morning. I need to spell my name. Benitez. Lisa Benitez. Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and I'm a clinical director with the Presbyterian Counseling Center. I've been with the center since 2016 in this role. So I wanted to share with you
Could you just-
basically what...
Could you pull the mic a little
Of
further?
course,
Thank you.
of course.
Thank you.
Sure. So I wanted to share with you the nature of our clinical work at the center and why it's so unique. And such, I guess you could say, an impactful site for us to have at Westminster by the Sea. I'm an attachment theorist. My PhD is actually in relational repair. And so many of our clinical team, many of our clinical members also adhere to that philosophy and how valuable it is that families have this type of science available to families, to neighborhoods, to individuals who need that kind of assistance and guidance. That is our niche in the community. That is what we specialize in. So I can appreciate people who want to make sure that the counseling services that are provided at the center are specific to that. But that is our specialty. That is what we do. And so this home setting is very valuable to us because it mimics, that it offers that home-like setting that many of the families need. I'm also, as an attachment theorist, I do specialize in the birth to 5 population, so many of the families that will be there are families of very young children. So that is the resources that we're able to offer at Westminster by the Sea, and I wanted you to know how unique it is and how special it is that our community offers that. There's not many other services in our community that can do such a thing. Any questions about the clinical work of our center? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We do have some speakers on this subject. First, Blake Kenton.
My name is Blake Kenton. We live right next door. First of all, I just want to start off by saying that I totally believe in what they're trying to do. I think it's amazing that they're able to help people, and I think it's awesome. But the only problem I have with it is it's a residential home. It was never that way whenever we bought the property. Otherwise, we never would have bought the property because, quite frankly, I don't really want to live next to a counseling center. I mean, it is what it is. I also, we got a letter that it's rented out by a third party. So it's not actually the church that's doing anything wrong. They're renting it out to a third party. With that being said, they're profiting off of it. It's not for the good of the community. They're making money.
Point of order, there's no rent. We are offering this free of
We'll
charge.
have a moment to speak.
Yeah, the applicant will have
A moment to
chance to
come back.
respond to any comments made by the audience after their comments.
At the end of the day, there's plenty of people over there all the time. There's traffic all the time. There never used to be. It used to just be a home next to us. We got a pool in the backyard. I can high five the people next door as they're having their meetings. I mean, it's just crazy to me. It's like, it's a home. It was always a home. It was always meant to be a home. It was never meant to be a business. And that's what it's being done as. It's not an office. It's a business. That's it.
Thank you for your time.
Question, sir. Sir. So, clarification here. You
Yes, sir.
said it's going on presently?
Yes, sir. It's been going on for almost a year now.
A year?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's been going on. They won't take it down. They wouldn't even field our phone calls at the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Barbara Liacono. Hope I said that right. Liacono.
My name is Barbara Loyacano, and in my experience while visiting my grandchildren next door to the church, I've experienced a lot of traffic, cars parking out in the street, and when, let's face it, when you try to put children into a car, sometimes they run to the other side of the car to get into their car seats, and there's been traffic. The cars that are going to the counseling center are blocking the view, and if there was another car coming, the child would have got hurt. There's a safety issue involved in their parking. They do not park always in the church parking lot. And the other item that I'd like to address is my granddaughter has experienced some ill will with Cruz because he ignored She was trying to get information on how the church could zone her property P rather, excuse me, zone the property to P without anybody being notified. And this is when, in August of 2021, the Daytona Beach Shores community okayed the counseling services because they were under the impression that it was zoned B, and that was incorrect. Mr. Cruz would not acknowledge my granddaughter's attempts to help him clarify that the property in the property appraiser's office is zoned as a single-family residence. The counseling services, according to the pastor, says that it's going to be limited to 4 visits. How many people are considered a visit? We've experienced approximately 10 people for each visit. 10 times 4 is 40 people a day, versus when the pastor was living there, it was only 1 person a day, sometimes 2 for maintenance or lawn maintenance or house maintenance. To me, that is a major impact. And let's see. And the property has been zoned for 18 years. The zoning as a single-family residence. When the church purchased the house, it was zoned single-family residence. I'm not sure if it was something different. I do not understand how the title companies could not pick it up. And it has diminished the value of the property, especially her property, because she's right next door. It does not follow the guidelines for a Zone P, zoning. It's supposed to be, if it butts a single-family residence, it's supposed to be 50-foot setback from the resident. Right now, there's a 0 setback.
3 minutes are up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Kahari Kenton. Kahari Kenton.
I'm Kari Kenton. I live at 3234 Black Loma, right next door. I'm here because I'm really uncomfortable with the amount of traffic that has been coming and going from the property next door. Not only are there multiple people parking in the road when they go to the counseling centers, I have random people mistaking my own residence as a counseling center because we're so close and they're both houses, residential properties. I have 3 small children of my own, house next door, and I worry about their safety. With the cars parked in the road and the extra oncoming traffic of the people going to the counseling, I'm afraid of them getting hit by a car. We have a very small active community down La Paloma with many people that take walks all the time. And then there's many children also that ride bikes and play in the roads in front of their own houses down the street. It was not made for, or the house wasn't built for commercial traffic. It wasn't, it was built to be a home, Everyone down that street is a home. The church is, you go into the church down Peninsula, I know that their parking lot wraps around, but that street, La Paloma, was intended to be for families, you know, and whenever I purchased my house, I felt safe, you know, I felt safe. I knew my neighbors, you know, I know everyone down that street, and everyone's very nice. And whenever they started running the counseling services next door, I felt really, really uncomfortable with people coming and going. Like, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I might have seen more than everybody else down the street, but there was new people every hour coming and going out of that home. I have no idea who they are, and I have no idea if my children are safe, you know, because I don't know them. And I thought whenever I purchased the house in 2019 that I finally was able to call that place home where I could raise my family, and I felt really safe. But now I don't feel that at all, because there's so many random people coming and going. I confronted the city and you know, the counseling center next door to kind of get a feel for what kind of people were coming and going. I understand there is regular family counseling services there, but they also have some things to do with Department of Children and Families. And so I asked them, you know, is there anyone that molests children or beats children or that has done heavy drugs? The only thing that they could get back to me was that they don't molest children. So there is a chance that the people coming and going have done things in bad nature that I worry about for my children and all the children down that street, because it's not just my children that live there.
Thank you for your time. 3 minutes are up.
One question. How long have you lived there, please?
Since 2018.
Since
Did you say 20?
2019.
19 years?
No, 2019.
Oh, 2000.
I'm only 30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next speaker is Andrea Deneret. You have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrea Benazet. I live across the road on La Paloma. Can you hear me? First and foremost, I want to say that I love living by Westminster Presbyterian. They have treated my family with kindness many times. And so I don't want to say anything against you guys in any way. But I am against having this counseling center across the street. Our street is quiet and peace-loving, which is why my family moved there. While I'm completely in favor of people getting counseling, I would prefer if it not be in the residential area. If it could be even held at the church itself, that might help with the problem, because then we wouldn't have people coming up and down La Paloma and parking on the street. And but having it in the residential area just creates more traffic, and well, it makes my neighbors feel uncomfortable for their young children. And I often see their kids riding their little bikes on the street, and I want them to feel safe. And my children are older, so I don't have that problem, but I feel like you should be able to feel safe where you live. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Watchter.
Dear Walter, if I can say it, I want to, your meeting is involving my church and my friends, and I have been, that street a long time ago had trouble with people that were, there was a bunch of kids that were
Here, would you bring your speaker closer, honey?
Thank you.
That's much better.
And there was a bunch of children that were stalking the little kids and different things like that was going on. And I know this office doesn't involve a whole bunch of kids at one time, but and so that's why I'm on both sides of this thing. It's my church, and I taught children for 40 years, and I would like to see a happy ending to this. And I thought the church owns a whole bunch of property, not on La Paloma, but the one that goes up behind the street that goes up behind the 7-Eleven store to on A1A up there. And that property, all they do is park their cars in there from that apartment house. Is where the cars are. It has nothing to do with the church or anything, and they could fix that so that it would not people would not be coming down up and down walk along. They could enter the office from, if it was on that property, that parking spot, they could go in and out of there without even coming onto La Paloma. They could enter it from the street. In front of across from that apartment house, and the church already owns that property and everything, so it wouldn't be putting anybody out or changing anything, and it would still be doing its job that it needs to do too. I just didn't want to have anything going crazy on that street again. Because my kid was a little kid when those other kids were there. And they did awful things. And one little girl that lived there when was a child there when Bobby was little, she killed herself. And they had drugs going on and talked a lot of kids out of going to school. It was not, if you come in contact with them, they get into a group and they pass it down. I mean, they pass on this whatever they like to do. They
Thank
pass
you.
it on.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Appreciate it. That's the last speaker, and I'd like to hear from the applicant again to respond. I think that's the last speaker on the...
Somebody has their hand up back there.
Sorry, I didn't see these on the way, and I just pulled it out quickly. My name's Kayla Murphy. I'm an attorney representing the Cantons. I think I can fill this out afterwards. That'd be great.
May I invite our administrative director to respond on my behalf, please?
Should we...
If there's another speaker, let's hear the other speaker before
Come up and fill out. What is your name, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kayla Hathaway. I'm an attorney with Coronado Law Group. And sorry. Yeah, that probably good morning, Kayla Hathaway, Coronado Law Group in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, 221 North Causeway. My firm has the pleasure of representing the Kentons in this matter. I'll give you a little bit of history on this. I've seen sort of the expressions on some of your faces wondering how the counseling center could have been operating without the zoning change. So we'll start with that, and then I'll expound a little bit on the Kentons' position here.
You have 3 minutes.
Yes, no. Absolutely. So based on the mistake on the zoning map, the city and the church were under the impression, right, we know that this was already zoned P, and so when that ordinance was passed allowing the accessory use of the counseling center actually began operation in August or so of this year, at least. But the Kentons noticed the counseling center activities, at least in August. So the Kentons have had 6 months of observation to actually see the impacts to their neighborhood. So when they are speaking on these issues, as well as the other neighbors, they're actually speaking from their own personal experiences and observations. This wasn't anything, nefarious. Obviously, the city and the church and the counseling center, were just, going about trying to deal with this very strange mistake that happened. But that is why you have the Kentons here saying that and the other neighbors saying they've had these experiences and they've already noticed the impacts that it has had on their community. If I could ask the slide with the front-facing picture of 3232 La Paloma, would that be possible to bring that slide back up? Great, thank you. Yep. Thank you. So if you look just to the left in the photo, that pink home, that is the Kentons' home. That is where they live as a family with their 3 children. And you can see just how close and tightly together those properties are. So the Kentons have concern that if this property that has been zoned single-family residential were to be turned into this public or quasi-public use, these issues that they have had with people coming up and down the street, parking all over the place, not using the church parking lot as intended, because that's very confusing. That's a mistake I know I would make, parking right there in front of the address property where I'm going. And that they will continue to have people coming to their door, and it's just not an appropriate use of this property at 3232 La Paloma to have a business there. I would also submit to the Planning and Zoning Board that this is in fact spot zoning. If this were to be allowed as a public or quasi-public rezoning. The reason that it would be a spot zoning, even though when you look on the overhead map, it sort of cuts into the church property, really when you see a picture like this is spot zoning. This is intended to be a home. And so thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time. And I would certainly ask that the Kentons' concerns be considered very seriously.
Thank you. Would you please fill that out so that we know on record? Thank you.
Thank you.
There's another speaker too.
I would like to speak if I may. Council, I didn't know these were available to fill out.
Okay.
I was sworn in. Thank you. Hello, my name is Deborah Suncheck. I live at 121 Esmeralda Avenue.
Could you take off your mask, please?
Oh, I can remove it? Okay, I'm sorry.
What's your name, please?
Excuse me?
Your name.
Deborah Suncheck, S-O-N-C-E-K. I live at 121 Esmeralda Avenue, which is across the street on an angle from them, directly behind the Westminster Church parking lot. I see that house clearly from my backyard and my carport area. I've lived in my house since 1991. I've raised a daughter, and my father and mother lived there before, so. There was always children playing in our neighborhood. When I was younger, of course, we all grown up already. I understand the concern for people with having a counseling situation in this 3232 La Paloma. However, I don't see what the other people are complaining about, and I'm not, because I can see it. And the reason I'm here is it doesn't affect me either way, whether the counseling center's there or not. I believe it does good for people. However, I don't see cars parking in front of it all over the street. I don't see a lot of traffic. If anything, we have a problem with the locals that go through there 80 miles an hour in a 25-hour zone. And I've seen it. I don't see people going up to the door from her home. I do see people that go to the counseling building parking in the church parking lot, maybe 2 cars at the most, on maybe every other day. Sometimes there may be 3 cars. It's very quiet. It's very orderly. I don't feel threatened. And I don't believe our safety has any issue involved with this. I am not a church member of Westminster. I can't get up that early, okay? I'm a night owl. I am a night owl. I watch the area. I keep an eye on the church. I see the neighborhood. I'm up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on the computer. I've always been that way, as far as when I was younger. So that's my hours of activity. I'm more concerned about vagrants, homeless people, than I am that counseling service there. I think it does good for the community. I don't believe it is a threat to anyone. And I see her child, and he's a very nice young man, riding his bicycle in the church parking lot. And he waves to me, Miss Simpson's son. So if she's so concerned about her son's safety, why does she allow him to ride his bicycle with his helmet on in the church parking lot one day when there's activity going on for counseling? I'm not putting anybody down here. I respect her feelings, but I also I wanted to voice my opinion and to tell council what I see each and every day since 1991. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Tanya Setter. It's Jetter or Setter?
Hi, I'm Tanya Setter. I live at 100 Simpson Avenue. I live right around the corner, and my son plays with Kari's son, and they play on that street, and I understand her concerns as a mother. My biggest concern would be the traffic. As the young lady that just spoke said, there is a concern for the speed and the traffic, and no matter who the traffic is that comes and goes, it is a concern. Our children play there, and more traffic is more traffic, despite if it's for a counseling service or not. And the pastor mentioned that they had all of these locations. So maybe this location is not the best location in a residential neighborhood. The other locations are not in a residential neighborhood, so let those locations support the counseling services. Again, my son plays with her son, and I want him to be as safe as they can possibly be. Thank you.
Now we'd like to hear from the applicant again.
Referring to our administrative director, please.
Good morning. My name is Laura Bond Walker, and I'm the administrative director for the Counseling Center. I was a board member for 19 years before beginning this position. I want to submit Ms. Sonchek's letter signed by 7 neighbors as well. I'll leave that here, supporting the center and its lack of impact. I'm really just here to correct some of the inaccuracies that have been said. One, there is no rent paid. This is not a commercial relationship. That was part of the stipulation of being on the property, was that there not be rent paid, so the church does not have financial benefit from our presence there. It is a service. We are a mission to the community for mental health. All of our locations are on church properties in residential areas. We have never had a complaint or an issue with a neighbor with any location that we have. The safety of people's children and their feelings of security are exactly what we're working towards. And so it's very important to us that we not have a negative impact on the neighborhood or make people feel unsafe. We have made, on that picture, this is an old picture, there is no hedge any longer between the house and the church, and there is signage there that indicates to park in the church parking lot and walk across. There's also been an improvement in that a walkway was created and paved with pavers from the church parking lot to the front of the house with a sign that says PCC Counseling Service this way. So when someone calls in and makes an appointment, they are asked to park in the church parking lot behind the church on Peninsula and walk across to the residential entrance. We can improve that in some other way if need be. The other locations that we have are in fact in locations with preschools and with many, many child populations. That's a lot of why we're located where we're located, to serve those people and their families. The layout of our office probably looks a lot like the living room of a family with children. We have places for children to play and be observed with their families In terms of structure, if you make an appointment to come with your child, maybe you're scheduled for 3 p.m., you come to that church parking lot, you come across with your child, so that's 2 people plus a therapist. Maybe there's someone else leaving from the 2 o'clock appointment. So, but the capacity of the house is 725 square feet. I don't think we've ever had more than 6 people in attendance at any time, and that would probably be for staff meeting. We've only been in operation there since the end of September, when we were approved by the city commission for zoning. We had a couple of staff meetings there prior with the pastor of the church, but the counseling center has not been in operation except for a little more than 90 days. So it's not been a year, and that is one of the concerns we wanted to get straight. All of our staff are licensed with the state and registered. They have background checks done. We are very cautious about who we bring into any community and into our center. We have a reputation of 36 years providing these services to the community. If you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not actually the church providing counseling, it's the Presbyterian Counseling Center?
The counseling center is supported by the area Presbyterian churches, and we're an affiliate of theirs. So that's the purpose of that connection. But the counseling center is a nonprofit entity supported by the Presbyterian churches.
Okay, but so it would not be the church using that as an office, it would be the PCC?
Correct.
Okay. And then I appreciate the family counseling, and thank you for providing that kind of overview. Is there substance abuse counseling in addition to family counseling?
No,
or is
the
it
two
strictly?
therapists that work in this office specialize with children and families. And the layout of this particular location supports that ability to be in that environment and provide therapy.
So is there ever substance abuse counseling?
Not at this location.
And that's
We're not substance abuse counselors. If someone had, for instance, been through an inpatient program and needed support after that to rebuild their family relationships, to regain their place in the community, to continue getting support after treatment, they might be referred to us then. We don't provide substance abuse treatment. We don't do any type of direct service work like that.
and how is billing accomplished by the counseling center?
There are a variety of ways. Our therapists can accept insurance commercially or employee assistance plan benefits, which are benefits provided through an HR department for free services, typically for a limited number of sessions. We have a large grant from the United Way specifically for this work that is called the Healthy Families Grant, and it's a Building Communities grant. United Way has given us those funds to help support folks who have maybe a gap in their copay ability or have no insurance and need this family support. So it lets us work with children and families that wouldn't otherwise be able to receive services, or perhaps on Medicaid and on a waiting list of 6 to 12 months. So those are the 3 primary ways, and we have a sliding scale. Part of the support of the churches is that they donate so that we are able to continue that support to people who may have a financial gap in being able to afford their services.
But it is patients are billed.
The patient's insurance.
Right, but there is a
insurance.
Okay. So there is billing associated with every client in some form or fashion?
In some form.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you. Appreciate that.
One question.
Yes,
Going
sir.
back to that grant, that's from United Way, you said?
Yes, sir. United Way funded us for 2 years.
It's what?
They funded us for 2 calendar years to provide this program. We had to submit a 45-page grant application with very thorough vetting about the services we were going to provide and how we were going to support children and families in the community using their grant funds.
And when did that begin?
It started July of this year. We didn't implement it at this location until after the approval in September.
And it's for 2 years?
It is for 2 years.
I have one more question. I'm sorry. So among the clients that PCC serves out of patient, are there clients who are there because of court orders compliance?
Yes. Like parenting classes. They might be court orders.
So there's court orders.
Parenting classes. That would be primary.
Do you have any questions? I just have a couple of comments.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you put some brush or something in between those houses, or a fence or something like that, so that children from each of those houses can't run through there or whatever? That would be my only thing. And fencing, decorative. And isn't there any place inside the church that you guys can do this and see people? Because I've been in the church a few times, and I was just wondering, it seems quite large, and it seems there's big offices in there. I just was wondering, would that ever be an option? To do what you do inside the church when the church is not operating as a church?
We have an office space there that is typically used if someone has a disability or inability to access the house because of the steps. So that's our ADA backup. But it doesn't have the ability to be in a living environment, to have children's toys, to be a place for people to play and have that home-like setting, I would say is the primary function, especially under the Healthy Families Grant.
Just see the parking lot behind, and I go there to go home, and
Yes.
I was wondering if there was any way a building could be built on the property where the parking lot is, or anything like that.
We can definitely discuss the fence options being helpful to do that neighborly relation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. You have a question? You have a question?
There are some people that don't care for a church setting. I mean, some people have bad issues with churches. The house provides that sense of respite, and it's comfortable home setting. Going into a church raises people's anxiety sometimes if they've had issues. So almost every room in our church is used through the week for something. So we would be bumping people from one room to room. But the main reason is that it provides, this is a home setting for them, and they don't have their anxiety going up because they're going into a church. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you.
Everybody keeps talking about how it's a home.
Excuse me. State your name again, please.
Kari Kenton. I live in the house right next door. I just want to bring up how everybody keeps talking about how they want it to be a home setting. It's meant to be home. I'm supposed to live next to a person, not 10, every hour there's different people. I'm not supposed to live next to a whole bunch of people going to counseling. It's supposed to be a home. That's what it's supposed to be. Thank you.
Okay.
In a quasi-judicial hearing, the applicant needs to be given the last word, so.
Yes, we need the applicant to stand up again to be given the last.
Well, I have one
All
motion.
the other people who spoke can't keep coming up.
Well, then that's your discretion.
No, you
Sure.
have already spoken. Thank you very much. I'm going to hear the applicant.
Didn't she speak?
It's the discretion of the chair, but generally they get their
Okay.
3 minutes and then
I'm
that's it.
sorry, but it is not just an office, it's also a meeting place.
Please, thank you, and sit down.
Thank you.
The applicant, please.
Thank you for hearing this. This property, it squares off our property as you saw in the sign, and it was a way to provide a wonderful setting for people to be helped. The church is always about helping, but we can put a fence up, it's fine with us. We could put signage out front, don't park here or something like that. We can do that. We can be accommodating, but see, this allows the counselors to even have the access to the yard area and other things where some good family counseling takes place. So our opinion is that this is ideal, but we do want to be good neighbors, and we'll do whatever we can to buffer it and to make sure that traffic is minimum. We're a growing church, and so the parking lot has cars going out of it all the time, but they're not counseling center cars. They're just people who are attending meetings there. But I thank you for your attention, and yes.
I do have a question for you. You could also, instead of putting signs all over the place, you could put a notice on the driveway that says, do not
Sure could.
enter.
Sure could.
And that kind of thing, and where the parking is or something, and some low bushes
Completely willing
either
to do
side.
that.
But that's just my thought. That's not the board's feeling, it's just my thought.
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you
Yes, we
very
can.
much.
I'm sorry, just to go on with, I agree with that. I mean, the more you look at this, some kind of shrubbery,
Yeah.
fence, yeah.
Okay.
As
Definitely.
Yes.
I would just encourage you to talk to Stuart before you put up any fences or signs and make sure you know.
Right, yes.
Well done.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I have a question for Mr. Cruz. Okay. So on the application, it actually says that there's no impact on item 2, the proposed zoning will have favorable or unfavorable. It says no impact, it will be used as an ancillary to the church as an office. And is that accurate? Because the church is not using that facility. It's actually the PCC. So is that, and that's, the church is mentioned throughout the application. It's an application submitted by the church. Is that accurate, what they submitted to you?
So the church is the owner of the property, and it's my understanding that they have an agreement with the PCC to undergo the services that are offered at that site. So the counseling services or the office use where the counseling services transpire, is an accessory use to the primary use, which is the church function. And that is how the land use issue is looked at. The ownership, who's actually running it, doesn't matter when it comes to zoning. There is something I wanted to clarify, Madam Chair, board members. There was a statement made that the property, that there has to be a 30, or I believe maybe somebody said a 50-foot buffer. That is the Volusia County code. I think somebody incorrectly stated that. And the other thing that I wanted to state for the record is based on my analysis as an American certified planner here in this city of Daytona Beach Shores. I've been here for since 2004. I've dealt with zoning issues for many years. Based on my analysis, this is not spot zoning. There is case law on spot zoning, and the way a building look has nothing to do with spot zoning.
Stuart?
Thank you, Stuart.
I just have a comment, okay? In all these people that made presentations, I didn't really get the opinion that the counseling service was the issue. The bigger issue was the traffic and the parking. And I'd just like your opinion on that.
So I really don't know because I haven't staked out the neighborhood, unfortunately. We've heard differing opinions as to whether or not there is a traffic issue there or not. But based on staff's analysis and based on the use and the square footage of the facility, there's only so much traffic that could be generated. And based on our professional analysis, based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers formulas, we do not see a huge generation in traffic for this site. I know that the counseling center and the church have attested that there's going to be maybe about 4 sessions a day. I don't know what hours that happen. I don't know where they're parking, but I know that the church has, and I apologize to the board and to the members of the public for this picture. It's not an up-to-date picture. The hedge is not there, and there's actually a sidewalk that connects the parking lot to the north to the property. And there is a signage out there as well where the folks who are receiving the services, are notified to actually park on that area in the north of the property and actually use the sidewalk to access the facility. So in my mind, based on the professional engineering standards that we utilize when we analyze traffic generation, I don't see a traffic issue there. However, the suggestion I believe that someone made, I believe it was a church, said that maybe they might be able to put up a fence or some hedging. We can certainly work with them to permit that if that's going to help any at all.
Thank you.
Any more questions for
Thank you,
staff?
Stuart.
There is one last thing, but I'm not sure if I should even mention this. And this is one of the reasons why I think as taxpayers and residents in the state of Florida, we need to basically take a look at the legislative sessions and the bills that are passed every year. Last year there was a bill that was passed, and it was actually codified in the state statute. I believe it was section 559.955. of the Florida statutes, and you'll see it in your staff report. I didn't highlight it in my presentation, but I just wanted the general public to know that this is one of the reasons why we have to keep track of what the folks in Tallahassee are doing. Essentially, the state and the governor signed a bill, which is not codified, as I just mentioned, in that particular statute, that allows the usage of single-family properties in single-family neighborhoods to essentially use their properties, that they pay taxes for essentially, any use that is not going to create any kind of a nuisance, essentially. So if a single-family property owner owned this property and they wanted to have counseling services there, and they were not creating, any kind of hazardous or negative impact on the environment or in the general community, they didn't have signage everywhere, they could essentially conduct those activities out of this location. So I just wanted to kind of remind people of that. Keep track of what's going on in Tallahassee.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yes, sir.
Everybody, any more comments? Do I hear a motion?
I would like to make an motion to approve this application with several of the conditions that were put by Madam Chairman here about the fence, shrubbery, which they work out with the city planner on that. So I would vote to approve this application.
I would just, back to the board, and I apologize for jumping in. This is a rezoning and not a special exception. You can't impose conditions. However, you can certainly make it, I guess, part of a recommendation that the applicant signs, but you can't impose conditions on rezoning.
So we'll strike that, I guess. Right?
You're making a motion to approve?
To approve, yes, but we'll strike those.
Take a vote, please, Sherry.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Mr. Ambrosewski?
Yes.
Ms. Britton?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving right along, next ordinance is a 2022-04 Treasure Island Development Agreement, 2025 South Atlantic Avenue, Frail, St. Armstrong Ave, etc. Stuart? Yes. And if there are any speakers for Treasure Island, we have paperwork in the back so that we don't have to call people later. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, City Planner with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. This ordinance that you see before you, Ordinance 2022-04, is an ordinance that would approve a development agreement between the City of Daytona Beach Shores and 2025 South Atlantic Avenue LLC, the owner of the Treasure Island properties here in Daytona Beach Shores. So the owner, as I mentioned, is 2025 South Atlantic Avenue. The subject properties, there's a total of 9 parcels that are currently under the ownership of the property owner. There's a 10th property, and I'll show you that in a minute, that is being considered for a potential west side garage, and I'll show that to you in a little bit. But it's my understanding that it's not under the current ownership of the property owner at this time. The property size is just under 4 acres. If this ordinance is approved, the development agreement is approved as well, and the development agreement provides, the way it's being proposed, provides for the demolition of the structure at 2025 South Atlantic Avenue. It would also provide for the restoration and maintenance of the subject property after the demolition of the structure at 2025 South Atlantic Avenue. The development agreement, as you probably have noticed, also establishes development criteria, and the development criteria includes setbacks, breezeway standards, things of that nature. It also includes deviations, entitlements, incentives for the construction of 300 hotel units and 200 multifamily residential units on the east parcels. So these are a combination of the parcels. You can see to the north, at the corner of Frail and Armstrong, you can see the Frail Street parcel. You can also see the west side parcel west of South Atlantic Avenue. This property right here, where the mouse is the 10th parcel that's being considered, and the property owner representatives can speak to what the progress is if the board cares about that. But the proposal that was originally submitted had included this particular parcel. We didn't include it in the actual development agreement because it's currently not under ownership, but at some point in time, it may become under the ownership of the property owner. And then, of course, you see the east side properties where the Treasure Island proper is located and the Sunny Shore parcels as well. So these are street views of the properties, and I've kind of recycled portions of this presentation from our comprehensive plan amendment presentation that you may have seen a few months ago. It's here at 2025, you can see the existing structure, and this is the Sunny Shore parcel here to the south of that structure on the east side of South Atlantic Avenue, and then this is the expanse of the properties to the west side. The Frail Street Armstrong property is vacant, currently vacant, and that's the reason why we really didn't take a picture of that, put it in the presentation. So one thing I want to note to the board members, and you may have noticed this since receiving an email on Friday, there are two development agreements that you see that you have. There's the original one that the staff had worked with the applicant to generate, and then staff also added some amendment and some changes to that, and that is what you received in the original package. And then on Friday, you saw another development agreement submission that was made by the applicant, and that was in strike-through format. So right now, what I'm talking about is the staff version that we presented and that we will be recommending approval for. So what you'll see in terms of the duration of the agreement, basically how long the agreement is going to last, what staff is proposing is 5 years to acquire a CO, certificate of occupancy, for a single or unified building that would have a hotel and a multifamily residential development component on the east side parcels, meaning Sunny Shores and the Treasure Island proper. That's the first option. The second, if the applicant or the developer wanted to do that, the other option in terms of the duration of this agreement is if the developer chose or the owner chose to just separate and have two separate developments on the west side, what the duration would be was if it's a hotel, it'd be 5 years to get a CO, and if it was a multifamily residential component on the Sunny Shores parcel, we would give them 15 years to receive a CO as well. So you'll see in the development agreement that there is a very detailed and outlined property preparation and maintenance standard or section that includes several standards. Staff generated that through conversation with the building department and through code enforcement, and essentially, we want to ensure that when the building is demoed, that the property will be adequately restored and maintained pursuant to public safety interests that the city has. Essentially, we don't want the site to become an attractive nuisance. And obviously, we want to keep up as much aesthetics as the law permits us to do. So the reason why we're including this is because the stipulated agreement did speak to demolition of the property under certain conditions or at a certain point. However, it didn't speak to the restoration of the site. So we know that we've been working with the property owner to, in a good faith effort to see the development of this property and to actually get the structure demoed. But unfortunately, in the stipulated agreement, we didn't speak to the restoration of the property, and we know that the property owner will do his due diligence and ensure that the property is restored, but we just wanted to have something in writing, and we saw that the development agreement was this opportunity. The same way how the developer came and asked for additional things, in addition to those standards that were, and incentives and entitlements that were articulated in the stipulated agreement, since we're going through a negotiation process through this land use contract, which is a development agreement, to effectuate the comp plan amendment and the stipulated agreement, we saw that this was an opportunity for the city to kind of nail that down. So the effective date of the entitlements and incentives, staff is proposing that it would be 1 day after the demolition and the restoration of the east side parcels. Staff staff also, so essentially, there are different things that the stipulated agreement calls for. As I mentioned, the demolition is one of them, but because it doesn't really nail down when the restoration would be, staff felt that the entitlements and incentives, even though the stipulated agreement calls for them, we felt that we should have a trigger as to what would enable those entitlements and incentives, and we're asking for 1 day after the demolition and restoration of the east side parcels. The development, again, agreement, if approved, would permit, as I mentioned earlier, 300 hotel units and 200 multifamily residential units. And the way the agreement is spelled out, you could have them separate or you can have them combined into one structure or separated structure. So the exhibits that you see in terms of the concept plans, those are for illustrative purposes, only. But it does show that, again, it could be one structure, it could be separated structures. And so whenever we move forward with the development, whenever the developer moves forward with the development, the process, as you know, board members, is that the developer will submit a site plan, a site development plan for review, staff will review it, and it will come before the board and before the council as well for approval. So what you see as exhibits in terms of the conceptual development, may actually be something different. As I mentioned, there are several deviations that were granted in order to make this happen. The deviations basically reflect the development standards that are articulated in the agreement. So essentially, a specific zoning category, if you want to call it that, or specific zoning standards were written specifically for this development to happen, and all of those essentially are deviations to the city's land development code. So as I mentioned, you see two versions of the development agreement. What I have here, the key differences, as you can see, I've already kind of noted what the city's position is, city staff's position is, and you'll see that in the middle column to the right, and I'm sure the applicant's legal representative and legal counsel will speak to this, but to the right you'll see essentially the version that you got on Friday. The applicant is asking for the development agreement entitlements, the effective date of the entitlements, incentives, and development criteria actually happen upon approval and recordation. So basically recording the clerk of court down at the courthouse. So that's when they're asking for all these standards and incentives and whatever to essentially become effective. So the second difference, major difference, is the duration. And as you may have seen, they're asking for 8 years to essentially acquire the building permit and to pay their fees associated with the building permit if it was one building that was being built or a hotel. So you can see there's some language differences there if you look at the agreement. The second option that they have in terms of the duration of the agreement would be if they were to build a separate multifamily residential structure, that the trigger or the milestone there would be 15 years to acquire the certificate of occupancy. So you can see the differences there. So these are concept plans that were submitted to the city in terms of unified development. You can see it's one singular building, basically on both the Treasure Island proper and the Sunny Shores property. And this is an architectural view of what was submitted. I mean, it looks like two buildings, but it's actually one there. I mean, there's a breezeway on the first floor there. And this is a concept rendering of a unified development street view. That's a beach view. And then this is a concept plan of a separated development, and this was actually submitted as part of the stipulated agreement. The stipulated agreement did spell out that, that this particular concept is not something that's going to that's written in stone, and that whenever the property is indeed developed, that it could essentially look very different. So here you see this red line here is this separation, or the property line for the Treasure Island property to the right, or to the north. I'm sorry, to the left and to the north. And the Sunny Shores property is to the right and the south. And you see two separate buildings there. So staff's recommendation has changed just a little bit from what you see in your staff report. After the staff report was written, there was some conversation among staff based on when the alternative tax relief entitlements, or I'm sorry, when the properties would benefit from the alternative tax relief program. And so what staff is recommending that the benefits of the alternative tax relief program, in other words, properties that would enroll in this program would not occur until basically a CO is issued. So in other words, the city would not want to be issuing rebates on increments in tax value, increase in tax value that would happen over time if there wasn't an actual physical development on the property. I mean, it's that's generally how these programs work, but we just wanted to make sure there wasn't any gaps anywhere in terms of our recommendations. So staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 2022-04 with the staff development agreement version that was included in today's package, including an amendment to section 3.2, the alternative tax relief program, to effectuate enrollment of individual parcels into the alternative tax relief program upon the issuance of a certificate of occupancy in said parcels. If approved, well, I'm sorry, tomorrow is the first reading, just in terms of future action. Tomorrow is the first reading of this ordinance with the City Council, and if approved on first reading, there will be a second reading on January 25th for the adoption. So one thing I just wanted to note is that we have had conversations with the applicant, the owner of the property, and we're hoping to have a teleconference this afternoon to kind of work out some of the differences that we have in terms of both proposals, and hopefully we can come to a resolution, and hopefully we can have a unified submission in front of the council tomorrow. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. And I know that we have a contingency from the developers group, the property owners.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions. Do you guys have any questions? Morning, Rob.
Morning, Madam Chair. Rob Merrill for the record with Cobb Cole. Thanks for having us. And Stuart, great job. You know, so he's got the whole ball of wax out in front of you now, but I got to say there's a couple of things outstanding. As Stuart mentioned, we're going to have a meeting this afternoon, I think, to talk about it, teleconference meeting, about the outstanding items. What I don't want to do is sit here and try to go through those in any detail with you guys. Right now, that's not the right way to do this. So I would suggest to you that, well, let me back up. You know, when we did the comp plan amendment, I didn't really get into much of who my client is. I want you guys to know that, so I'm going to take just a minute to tell you. Acres Capital is the owner of this property, and as it kind of implies by their name, they're not a developer. They're a capital lender in this case. My firm represented the previous property owner and the one before that, by the way, just full disclosure, and those folks weren't able to build a hotel here. They couldn't get it together for whatever reason. So Acres agreed to lend them the money, and as part of that, Acres looked at, of course, the value of the real estate and also the value of that building. They had a structural engineer look at it and say, this thing has value, and you can do what you got to do to make it safe, but you can rebuild a hotel in the bones of this building. Now, staff didn't think so. I think we had something happen this past year with the property, the condo down in South Florida, everybody I'm sure is aware of, and that created a lot of energy and sometimes animosity about whether or not this could be rebuilt. So, I mean, I'll back up and look at an example of a project that I'm proud to be involved in Daytona that you guys might have seen, which is used to be called the Whitehall Inn for years. Ocean Beach Club, I think it was called after that. Premier Hotels, the Narin family are rebuilding that project with a Marriott Renaissance, which is going to be a phenomenal new hotel in Daytona Beach. They're doing it with the same kind of bones this piece has, in my opinion, just based on the structural engineering input that I've seen. All that being said, I want you to understand that my folks that I represent said, look, we know what the city wants, which is the demolition of this structure. Clean it up, make it safe, and put a new hotel there when you can, right? And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think that they're doing everything they can to do that. With some of the changes about the timing, et cetera, that's just trying to make this so it works for their investors, you know, ultimately. And I think you guys are you know, have business minds and you understand what they're trying to accomplish. So with that said, I think what we'd like to do here is ask you guys to sort of be something flexible with us in the sense that, well, I'll give you two choices, I guess, for my opinion. One, put this off to another day, which this is moving fast. We want it to be done right too. Or allow us to meet with the staff. It's going to the commission tomorrow. So hopefully we get those details ironed out before tomorrow. And if you were to make a recommendation that this go forward on that basis, that's what I would hope for.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
Okay, any comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk to Stuart. I just have a big question. You guys are having a meeting this afternoon and you're trying to iron out some issues. How are those issues going to impact our decision that we make now? Should we postpone making a decision, or, you know?
So I'm going to leave that response to our city attorney in terms of process.
Okay. So I guess one of the things that it's important for you all to understand when you're doing this is that you have different roles. Your role as a quasi-judicial decider for things like rezoning and special exceptions is that you have to hear evidence, make a decision, and then that decision has some weight. It has some authority behind it. When we bring you an ordinance, you don't have the power to stop or pass an ordinance. That power vests entirely within the city council. So when you are hearing an ordinance, you are just making a recommendation to them. So you can move forward on this with a recommendation, for example, to accept the development agreement along with the city staff. And that will keep the process moving because again, you don't have the power to kill this at your level regardless. So whether you like or don't like the changes, you're just making a recommendation to the city council. So with that information, it's kind of up to you all what you want to do, but it's going to council tomorrow regardless. So if you want it to go with your recommendation, you would probably want to hear it and vote on it today.
Thank you. Can I hear a motion? Oh, excuse me, we do have speakers. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. We have some speakers, I'm sorry. First speaker, Denise?
Yes.
Ferrara? Sorry about that.
Thank you. My name is Denise Ferreira. I just purchased the property at the corner of Schulte and Park, so my house is actually on there. When I bought it, that was a big eyesore, and I'm so impressed at how you guys are working together to improve that end of Daytona, because it's Daytona Beach for me. Anyway, I'm thrilled. I'm very, very happy. My only question is, I wanted to know about the renderings, and I just got pictures of it, so that answered one of the questions. The other one was the Treasure Island parcel. Is that the hotel and Sunny Shores is possibly the multifamily, or is the A1A parcel multifamily? I don't know which is which. So I know Treasure Island is going to be the big
Sunny Shores is the
multifamily. Okay. And is the A1A parcel, is that boutiques and shops and things like that? I heard, oh, sorry.
This might make it easier, but this
Yeah.
is Rob Merrill again. So the development opportunities that you just asked about would be on the west, what's called the West A1A parcel, if they happen at all.
And that will be
Sunny
what kind
Shores
of...
is the multifamily, and the Treasure Island is the
So what is this? What will that be?
same thing, parking primarily, and they could have some retail
Okay.
uses that are outlined in the.
Okay, and then the last question, Frail
Parking.
Street, this is my house.
Parking only.
And then the only thing that our neighbors are concerned about is the lights coming down on top. We're thrilled that it's going to be a parking area
Yeah.
again and clean and nice.
I probably should let Stuart address what the code requires, but at the end of the day, those things will all be addressed when we come through with the site plan that shows
Okay.
exactly what's going to happen. You'll be part of that conversation.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah, we're just not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm saying
We're
go
moving fast,
fast.
though. We are.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Murphy. That one I can say.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Murphy. I live at 136 Park Avenue. My house is the one that would be directly adjacent to the proposed parking garage on the west side of A1A. That house with the bright white roof is my property. And when I came here this morning with some very specific recommendations. It sounds like we're at a very amorphous stage at this point, but my concern is that unless some specifics get built into that PD early, anything can happen. And so the more specific we can be, the more comfortable I would feel, certainly as a neighbor. You might be surprised to hear that I would have no objection to a two-story parking garage immediately adjacent to my backyard. I've been looking at the looming blight across the street since I moved here in 2015. Almost anything would be an improvement. That said, I think there are some, if a parking garage goes in there, there are some specific concerns I have. Number one, if it doesn't absolutely abut my property, if there's some kind of corridor behind there, that there be a protection so that that does not become a rat's nest or attraction for vagrants. So it would have, I would want something that can be definitely sealed off behind that parking garage rather than a throughway, because otherwise it becomes a dumping ground. Another thing that I'm concerned about is that they do the best that they can in terms of making an attractive parking garage. I think nobody wants to look at just a flat brick face and the grills of a lot of cars. And I think you have, the town has a lot of discretion in terms of the requirements that you put on how attractive or how that might have to be laid out. And then during the construction, we get, of course, the wind off the ocean, and everything comes to my back porch first. And so I would want them to have some kind of bond so that if they do demolition and something comes across that does any damage to my home, that we could be assured that we could have restitution for that without going through some extended legal process with their insurance company. We want to make sure that it's done in the most safe way possible. There will be a big change if this happens. I think that it largely will be a very good change, and we're looking forward to seeing something happen there. As I said, again, no objections, just please do it well. Do it in a way that everybody can be proud of from the whole way around that property, and do it at the PD stage so that we're not negotiating from a place of weakness later on. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ann Ruby.
Ann Ruby, 137 Park Avenue. My house, my backyard faces the Frail Street. My backyard abuts the Frail Street parcel. I'm also truly in favor of this. I think it's a wonderful project. I want to reiterate everything that Sandy just said. It needs the you need to put it into the PD stage. It can't be later. You know, if the plans upstairs, I know they're conceptual, they showed a 10-foot corridor between the parking garage and the property line. Well, that should have a tall fence at the front end, and it should have a gate in the back. And you could possibly plant bougainvillea up the side so that it discourages people from being a cut through, but that needs to be in the PD. I think also it would be good to put in the PD that if they acquire the 10th parcel and that changes the plans or in any way is going to be involved, that the abutters get notified of that as well, and that it just doesn't come up as kind of an amendment that slides through. I would like to see this on the 5-year plan rather than the 8-year plan. I think it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I think that there's 2 public facilities that I think you need to be aware of. I don't know if Daytona Beach Shores can do anything, or you can require the applicant to do anything, but I think we need a lighted crosswalk there. If it's not gonna be valet parking and it's self-park, people are gonna be crossing that street all day long. The next light, it's Bonifer, that's not gonna be adequate. So I think you do probably need to be aware of getting safe crossings across the street, and I don't know who the person is or where in the process that happens. And also, it would be awesome if you could require the applicant to build sheltered bus benches on both sides of the street. Because someday we're going to have a trolley that's going to move people around, and it would be awesome if there was a place for people to wait for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Tim Ellis. What is it?
Tim Bayless. I own property on 2043 South Atlantic Avenue, which is just south of Sun Shores. This has been a long time coming. I first of all want to say my appreciation to the building department over the last 12 years. They've tried to make that building as safe and look as good as it could. I mean, one time they painted the whole building and they painted all the cars in our parking lot. And the contractor was very good. He went right out, bought buckets and cleaned everybody's car. But our question is, after the 25th, is there a time frame of when they were going to do demo?
In the agreement.
I'll wait till.
Okay. Okay, that was my one question. And can they implode the building, or is it going to be able to take it down from the top down? As I know, the property north is pretty close to the. And it'd be nice, because, I mean, we still have people trying to break in that gate. The other day, with somebody called the police on them because kids were trying to get in there. And years ago, you could see kids up on the top, and it just, I mean, the shores, we're very proud of the shores, and it's just been an eyesore for too long. But definitely in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I respond?
To respond to some
Yeah,
of
I
those
think
things,
Stuart
yes.
probably can respond to the last question, but I'll start with the first two. Ann and Sandy and I know each other pretty well. We do a lot of this kind of stuff in other jurisdictions. Interesting that Sandy was talking about the parking structure and its alleyways between and stuff, because we actually have a situation like that with the Hard Rock going on right now that we, I think, came to some resolution on the basis of some of the questions that Sandy was talking about. This development will, like they were alluding to, go through a site plan approval process. You guys are going to get a chance to see it. We're mindful of all the concerns that were raised. I mean, appreciate the fact that you guys are literally right in our backyard. So what I would suggest is that we make sure we have a bridge, that we stay connected throughout this, and you guys know how to find me pretty easily. And so as we go through this, we put things in front of you, we'll certainly want to get your input. And at this point, as was mentioned, this is a much more generalized proposition that's in front of you right now. So I think everybody from the staff perspective is telling you, please move forward with this. I said, hold off if you want to. I was just saying, if you think you need to, but I think that's sort of, the train's already left the station. So my suggestion to you remains, which is allow this to go forward tomorrow night. Let us talk ahead of time to try to weigh in and negotiate points that are still outstanding with this board right here. I think it'd be futile. So I would suggest to you that you go forward with some sort of good faith. I don't know how you phrase it. City attorney can help you with that, but good faith effort to come to some conclusion amicably about this, because we've been working hard to try to do that throughout. So, any questions for me? I'll stay.
I just like to make a couple comments. I think the time frame is good because I own a business and it's hard to get product, and people need a chance to get this done correctly. So I think a difference between 5 years to 8 years is not a big deal. I don't think that any of the properties that are around it, if you heard anything, your insurance, I'm sure, covers everything. And so thank you for your efforts.
And one of the other reasons that I think staff would recommend you move forward, I'm not sure if that's what Stuart was going to get up to say or not, is that the development agreement does contain a provision that requires them to demolish the building within 120 days of the adoption of the development agreement. So the longer we dilly-dally on holding off on the hearings, the longer that 120-day stretch moves out. As of right now, if we can get this development agreement approved in January 25th, that's when the clock starts for the 120 days when they would have to demolish it.
Right. Thank you. Okay, everybody, do I hear motion?
Good or bad?
So, Madam Chair?
So you want to answer that man?
Oh, okay.
Gentleman,
Yes.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah. So as the city attorney mentioned, after the approval of the development agreement and its recordation, the owner will have 120 days to demo the building. So in terms of the implosion question, it's my understanding that it would not be an implosion because of environmental issues and some other issues. So it's unfortunately we won't have that pretty site.
I move to recommend approval of ordinance 2022-04 as presented.
Second.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Ms. Burt?
Yes.
Mr. Ramazuski?
Yes.
Thank you all for.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good evening. See you February 14th.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, yeah, right.
We'll be back in 10.
We're adjourned.
Official.